I'm Angela Thomas, partner consumer and retail at Deininger Consulting India. Headquartered in Germany, Deininger Consulting is one of the world's leading executive search and leadership consulting firms. I'm thrilled to have Mr. Puneet Chhatwal with me today. Mr. Chhatwal is currently the managing director and CEO of the Indian Hotels Company Limited and has been associated with the organization since 2017. He's a global professional with close to 4 decades of leadership experience with hotel groups across Europe and North America. Most recently, he was with the Steigenberger Hotels, the Deutsche Hospitality as the CEO and member of the executive board. And prior to that, he worked with the Residor Hotel Group and Furin Group. Welcome, Mr. Chhatwal, to Deininger Leadership Talk Series.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Lovely. As you know, today's theme is leadership resilience. And I would like to start with something I read, something that John Maxwell said. The pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change, but a leader would adjust the sail. And I think that sort of summarizes what resilience is all about. And given that, if I could start with my first question, what does leadership resilience mean to you in the overall leadership context, so to say?
You see, firstly, it's two different words and brought in together, mainly because of COVID-19 and the pandemic. So leadership in itself is an attribute. To keep extending those quotes, one could say leaders are born, not made. I think leaders can also be made. And resilience is something which is a part of your personality. That is something which is very difficult to train. And yes, there are people who, when they navigate through storms or navigate through headwinds, which are very strong, then they start adjusting the sails. That is what you can call also intuition. And intuition comes through experience and it comes through exposure. And if you have been in similar situations before, maybe not the depth and magnitude of COVID-19 or pandemic, but have you been in difficult situations? What did you do then? When you were learning from key leaders, how did they react? What is it that they did well? What is it that they did that brought in resilience in the organization? So I think on those fronts, I think resilience or the pillar of resilience is built. And that usually, when coupled with good leadership attributes of being authentic, of being daring or bold, of being intuitive, of being, what you call creative. When you add these two components, then we start talking about leadership resilience.
Right. No, agreed. And, you said intuition is such a key attribute. And perhaps an extension to that is also self-reflection and self-awareness, to build that resilient trait in yourself. How does, and I think you took that example of, perhaps no one went through the same magnitude like the pandemic sort of put on all of us. But how does one overcome the fear of being judged? A lot of leaders sort of struggle. Struggle is perhaps a stronger word, but they took a moment to understand what it is all about. But as leaders, there's also an inhibition to say, I don't know. How does one overcome that?
Culture. I think building strong culture in any organization is fundamental to go through very difficult phases. And if you have a culture that has very strong core values, so we have kept for all our brands the core values of Taj, and we say Taj stands for trust, awareness, and joy. And if there is trust, then you are ready to fail. So if you're trying something, it's not the outcome that is so critical, then the journey itself. If you are aware of what's happening, in your macro environment, if you're aware of what has to be done, if you're aware of your own responsibility, which is very strong with the Tata Group in terms of your, in such situations, your responsibility towards the community, then that helps you. And finally, joy in doing. It's not, oh my God, now I have to do this, or I have to do that. You know, the joy in doing what you do every day in good times and in bad times. There is a very, very famous saying, in actually, because you are a part of a German group. So it is doing the right things in gute sowie in schlechter Zeit. So in good and in bad or difficult times. So that's the key. And
Interesting.
And if you have the joy all the time, then even a bad time enables you to turn an adverse situation into an opportune situation.
Interesting, very interesting. And you made a note of the culture, Taj, and the overall Tata Group. And I know there's this immense focus on people within the group. But I always also feel that resilient leaders sort of need to balance empathy and compassion with a hard, rational outlook to protect the business or financial performance. How do you think leaders can find that balance between empathy and financial performance?
Well, leadership would be a failure if it's only financial performance. Financial performance is an outcome of your leadership attribute. And leadership attribute can be business acumen, but not the performance per se. So performance is dependent on a lot of circumstances which we don't control. So you could have the best attributes, you could have the best acumen, but look at what happened to the tourism, hospitality, aviation industry. You would not have any financial performance because it was locked down. The international borders were shut, the planes were not flying, the hotels were not open, the pools are still shut in the city of Mumbai, the spas are shut. So that is now when another good saying comes in that winners don't do different things, they do things differently. And in that situation, the ability to make a difference is far more important than just the metric of financial performance. In your shareholders today, your stakeholders, all stakeholders will actually reward you for that, that you did the right thing. And I think that's what this pandemic has definitely taught most companies, most businesses, most industries to do. And as we all hear, as important businesses here, that suddenly you see ESG is becoming far more important than it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or 5 years ago. So I think it's about doing the right thing and it's about making a difference.
I agree. And I unfortunately, tourism as a sector was at the forefront of facing the adversity. One could imagine that resilience is not just about coping and survival. It's also saying, how can I really seize the opportunity and move from a survival mode to a growth mode?
To a revival and eventually thrival. Sorry to interrupt, but you said something which is close to my heart, and I said it very recently, that hope is not a strategy, but perseverance and resilience is. So I think just relying on hope in a pandemic or in a downturn or in a very difficult environment is not going to help you out.
How do you perhaps move from that mode of saying, I've survived this, but now I need to sort of seize this and move on to the growth opportunity? Is as a leader, do you perhaps keep a few things in your mind that sort of keep pushing you to move from coping to survival? Survival to growth.
To revival or growth.
Yes.
So I think there is nothing better than survival to revival. It happened, but during the survival phase, how do you keep people engaged? How do you use certain opportunities? I think we proved that through 2 of our new brands that we did. That is our homestay brand called Ama. Already we grew the footprint in the last 2 years to 60. of which 34 are in operation. We created the home delivery business called Human, coupled with hospitality at home. That vertical is also now there to stay. It was not just for the pandemic, so we are continuing with that. And we started creating Human as a cafe or a small shop. The first two are open. The next 5 to 10 should be opening very soon, including 2 in Delhi before the end of this calendar year, actually. At least definitely one, and if one gets delayed, would be in Jan. It's all dependent on what's, if everything is open or shut down in the third wave or not. So we did the home delivery business. We did the homestay business. We sharpened our brand, which was there for 40 years as an example, called Chambers, which is the private membership club. And the Chambers in Delhi became the place in the last 6-8 months since its relaunch to be seen. And we doubled its size and made it a state-of-art, best-in-class internationally, I would say. So there are things you can do with the existing business in how to improve on what you've been doing, and you do some new business. While doing all this, we relied on our core values of Taj, which are exuded in what people very proudly call in our organization the Tajness. Tajness is a 360-degree value proposition, including how we treat all our stakeholders. And we relaunched for the safety and security of the people, Tajness as a commitment re-strengthened. So we saw that while others were shut or were wondering whether it should open or not open with very little business, we opened up faster, especially in destinations like Goa. And we were able to revive not only our own hotels, but we were able to help revive a destination. We were able to come up with campaigns like one of the very successful campaigns we did, or I'll give you examples of 2 of the 10 that we did. One was the 4D. The 4D was you dream, then you get into your car, you drive, you discover a new destination, and then you delight yourself. So this is when just drivecations were coming in as after the lockdown, things started opening up. And very recently, with the government's approval, the Honorable Prime Minister's slogan of Dekho Apna Desh, we did Dekho Apna Desh, version 1, and now the version 2 was done, which helped get people moving as it's an important sector. It has a huge ripple effect in terms of employment. It has a huge impact in terms of GDP growth. So while helping yourself, you're also helping the industry. And obviously, in my other role as president of Hotel Association or as the chair of the tourism committee of CII, lobbying with the government to help with the emergency credit line guarantee scheme, or in short called ECLGS, moratoriums, getting the industry status in different states, still lobbying to get infrastructure status or inclusion in the concurrent list of constitution. So there is a lot of things you do using an adverse situation to get to a revival, and ultimately back to travel, because travel is a fundamental basic need of human beings. It's going to come back. As we know, all leisure destinations as we speak today are full. They're doing better than pre-COVID times. So it's all we are waiting for is corporate travel to come back. But where was leisure travel also a year ago? Where was leisure travel in April, May, June, when we suffered with the second wave? So there was no leisure travel either. Similarly, there is no corporate travel to the extent we would like to have today. Some has started, but even this phase shall also pass. So they say this too shall pass, and there will be a revival in corporate demand too, maybe in a different form, but the growth will come, and from a growth, the exponential growth will also come, as has always happened after every crisis. It has taken 6 months to 1 year to get into that exponential growth.
Right, agree. And then I agree this too shall pass, but wonderfully sees the opportunity. I'm amazed how the entire team has come up together to make sure that survival is now moving towards growth. I also feel leaders as good as their team, and I've always noticed you've always empowered your team. You've also encouraged them to do more, do things that are different. But as a leader, you've been exposed to such different circumstances, but perhaps your teams live those experiences through you. But the ability to manage that pressure, that stress could get onto them. And we're hearing this term which has sort of come at the forefront, the entire mental health concern. How do you help your employees cope with that? Or how do you address those issues?
Oh, we did a lot of things, and our founder, Jamshedji Tata said that community is not just another stakeholder, rather the purpose of the existence of any business. And we at Taj especially have been very strong in building Taj for families, which the things we don't talk about because we don't publicize these things. We do it in our own way. So for all of our frontline workers, of course, some got impacted by COVID. They got the best of hospitalization. The families, everybody was taken care of. Um, in in a very very nice way. It was the expense did not matter. The important thing was the employee and the families.
Mm.
Second thing is we had constant one-on-one help. That there was a helpline that was constituted, so people could ring, ask for people. We had initially we had at a XCOM level daily meetings, weekly meetings with the senior leadership team, which is the top 30, 40, followed by monthly updates. Initially, bi-weekly update from my side to the board, to the employees, sometimes through letters, sometimes through video messaging, so that people are awareness, which is our second people. People are always aware of what is happening, how we are dealing with the situation, what are we doing for the community, what are we doing for our people, how we are contributing to the rest of the group and the group initiatives, because Tata Group took a lot of initiatives. So I think a lot of that was done. Employees who were unfortunately losing their jobs and were employees of our contractors, whether it was a travel desk or a limousine service, we took salary cuts to support their salaries, which we call Taj for Families. And then, of course, we supplied 4.5 million meals to migrant workers and frontline workers in different hospitals. We were able to raise for both these initiatives through salary contributions for Taj for Families, as well as for the meal service, north of 60 crores over the last 2 years to support that. Further, we also did host the medical staff in our hotels. We also supported that through the Taj Public Service Welfare Trust, which was more than 100,000 bed nights, around 70,000 plus room nights, but some rooms had double occupancy. So that was a very, very important. All these initiatives were happening. The staff was seeing that. And we kept, that way we kept also the hotels operational. We were able to do something for the society so that those workers are fresh when they're dealing with the patients in the hospital and are able to give a good service. And there's such a long list. I can keep going on what all we did from a community service point of view. Some of it is documented. Some people want to write about it. So there will be some literature available soon, because people say such good things should be documented. And we did a lot for our employees. The very fact none of our permanent employees lost job with us, not one. So we did not furlough, or we did not, just fire people just because there is a pandemic. This is long-term view. of things, and it's nobody's fault, especially on an Indian subcontinent. When you take somebody's job away, you almost lose everything, as the social systems are not like in the Western Hemisphere, right? So it's a very difficult situation. Of course, in the West, we did furlough because the government was giving that as an incentive to people. So in the US, property in New York or in London, we did that, but not on the Indian subcontinent.
No,
And that worked well for employees there because they preferred that. And a lot of those, as we all read, don't even want to come back to the industries. They all wanted that support, which they got, and have found, other areas of employment or excellence, or were able to do things that they didn't have time to do before. So I think we, on that front, we have behaved and conducted ourselves in a very responsible fashion.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for your kindness, Mr. Chhatwal. I'm sure, and that point that you made, that employees were always aware what was happening. I think that's the communication always helps. It sort of breaks that barrier and breaks that illusion of guessing and assuming things. And I think you've done a wonderful job. And the next thought in my mind, I'm not sure if that applies to you, but there's always this constant pressure on leaders. It's either self-induced or external, because you're at a position of responsibility and power, and sometimes people feel there's no room to fail. Do you think this superhero image that leaders sort of bear the burden of is still prevalent, is changing, or do you think it's sort of now died down altogether?
It's a difficult one to answer. So you're right. Of course, people look upon the leaders as like perfect people, but at the end of the day, they're human beings. They also have a family, and they also cook with water. They also, have the same physiological needs. So I think it's a very difficult one for leaders to fulfill everybody's needs and wants, but that's what differentiates good and progressive leaders from just leaders, right? I would say that I have been able to manage that because I try to be myself. I don't hide my emotions. If I get emotional while giving a speech, then it is okay. It's okay to have, an emotional moment. It's not that you have to be always in control of everything in every situation. As I said at the beginning of the talk, when we spoke about leadership and resilience, I said authenticity in leadership is very important because people can see through that. Are you authentic or not? And I think you're right, you're spot on. It is a challenging task, but I personally feel if you try to be authentic, it's fine, and people should learn to, accept that leaders can also sometimes make a mistake, but it should not be a repetition of the same mistake. Then it's not right. But it's okay to be a human being, right? At the end of the day, as we say, there is human, right? So I personally feel, but there is a lot of pressure on the leaders to find solutions. And maybe that's why leaders are where they are, because otherwise everyone would be a leader.
I agree. And I think authenticity takes a leader along, where people are becoming more human about their leadership idea. I think we're in the right direction. And I think leaders should be allowed to fail a few times here and there. And I think that's okay. Like you said, we're all humans. And I hope we remain on this journey. One last thing, Mr. Chhatwal, you've had such a rich career. You've worked in Europe, North America, India, such diverse organizations, such different people. Reflecting on your career, can you think of an instance which taught you the importance of resilience and helped you evolve better as a leader?
This is a very difficult and a vast question to answer. So I would say, just like there is a life cycle of a business or of any product, there is a life cycle also of your career. And in different phases, if you were to divide your career, also like you say, an infancy phase, a growth phase, a mature phase, and then maybe you retire. Hopefully, you don't get into a decline phase. There are different incidents which help shape your leadership attributes, profile, and shape you as a human being. So I would like kind of go back to the beginning of my career, which was in India, where I spent the first 5 years. And at that moment, I did not know how blessed I was to work in the non-aligned meet, the Asian Games, the Commonwealth Heads of States meet, doing Prime Minister catering in Hyderabad House, being at the Ashok Hotel in Delhi, which was the property, uh, you know, rising to the occasion in terms of, the, the, the visiting heads of states. They all used to come and stay mainly at the Ashok property. So getting that exposure from a leader of Palestine to US to UK to whatever you call it, or the Queen herself. So that was a very good exposure and a lesson on how you get things done. And you have to think that you turn the clock back to 35, 40 years ago, how not only you got it done, how the nation rose to the occasion to get it done. And because those days the means were less versus today. Today we are in the G20 and we're a very progressive country, and you can get anything done. But those days, 35, 40 years ago, the means were less. Then the second part, I would say, is the phase where I started my career in Europe, and there I learned a lot, and some of the lessons and some of the things that I went through, like 9/11, for example. Flying on empty planes to the US because people suddenly got scared of flying, because if aircraft could be used as a weapon, it was devastating for our industry. Before that was the Operation Blue Star, which was very difficult. The Gulf War that was there, and the businesses came to standstill when it was traveling. Followed by another key learning: what you do when the world gets hit by the global financial crisis. When we had the crash of Lehman and the aftermath. I mean, in the Western world, the impact was far larger than here. So I think having gone through some of these, it teaches you different lessons. One teaches you how things can change with, bombings in London, Madrid, Paris, the firing in the cinema hall, or the Nice, the south of France thing which happened, how businesses get suffered, how people's lives suffer, how people lose, near loved ones. What happens in a crisis, a global financial crisis, which creates like a financial wreck, if I may so call. How do you deal with that? More recently, as we say, going through COVID, and that too as a hospitality industry. So the lessons learned, the experiences made in each of these events are different, and there are different phases, because also your career progresses. You are not always a CEO. There is a journey towards that, and the needs and wants at those levels where you were when those crises happened were very different. But as I said, at the end of the day, you were still a leader in one form or the other, whether you're leading 20 people, 200 people, or 2,000, and now 20,000 plus. So the needs and wants change, and your answers change, and the situations keep changing. If it was the same situation repeating itself, then it's different. So that's where your experience comes handy in the form of intuition. And then if you can carry your team together using or leveraging culture of the organization, then it helps you to adjust the sales, to quote and unquote you at the beginning of our dialogue.
Right. Now, what an amazing journey, Mr. Chhatwal. More strength and more power to you. And thank you so much for this lovely conversation. I'm sure, like me, everyone else would find it very, very inspiring. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and look forward to doing this in person soon.
Absolutely. Lovely.
Thank you.